Welcome to Doc's Daily Dose for Dads, prescribed by Dr. Harrison. I love research. It is one of the fundamental pieces of what I do. I love looking stuff up. Sometimes I can go down a rabbit hole. So today I brought with me four people, Courtney, Jasmine, Carl, and Casey of Ology Research Group to talk to me a little bit about what they do. How you guys doing today?
Hey.
We're doing great here from New York City.
So this is gonna be interesting because there's five of us here, and we aren't in studio to be able to see everybody's faces and cues. So don't hesitate to jump on each other's voices here. All right.
All right.
So my first question is, how in the world did all you guys meet?
Casey, you want to take that one? I know you're the original.
Yeah, I'm the one that connects everybody together. Hey, Carl and Jasmine and I have been knowing each other for a very long time now. Jasmine and I actually went to undergraduates together. And Carl, Jasmine, and I went to get a PhD together. So it was about a couple of years ago when we were graduating. I had the idea that I wanted to create a pathway that would help people kind of better communicate and negotiate their disagreements. And I asked Paul and Courtney to join me because we had worked together in the student government and we had a really great relationship. And I just really loved working with them. And so they thought that was a great idea. And then Courtney joined because she was a coworker of mine. And I always envied her smart talents, and she just has this really cool understanding of math and numbers. And we wanted to join with them. I just feel like she was such a good addition. So for months, we tried creating that app, and it didn't work. And now Courtney's your turn to pick up the story.
Courtney, you want to pick up the rest of the story?
So then after that, we focused on making this. We were trying to focus on making an app, and then it kind of iterated into the strengths of the rest of the team. So Carl and Casey were really good in terms of helping out with grant research overall, and they started to kind of lend out those resources. And I've learned a lot from them, from how they approach certain things, how they're able to kind of engage interns and things like that. So it's kind of really evolved into this lovely thing that we call Ology Research Group. And Jasmine's always there to kind of keep us in line and make sure that we're sticking to our agenda and all of the things that we're doing are feasible. So I'm kind of excited to see where our overall organization is going.
Now I'm curious, did you guys, while you were at school together, were you guys studying the same thing, or was everybody in different fields, different majors?
I guess maybe I can take this one. Can you all hear me pretty well?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So Jasmine, Casey, and I were doing our PhD programs, and I was actually a year ahead of them. And it wasn't until the commencement ceremony of Jasmine and Casey in 2015 where Casey kind of said, hey, we should probably look into doing something together. And we do have, even though our PhDs in the same field, which is a branch of the social sciences called conflict analysis and resolution, which is kind of like an intersection between anthropology, communications, and also a little bit of negotiations and crisis management. We do have our special contributions to the field. So from my background, I have molded it to be more in the realm of public health, and also just aggregate sentiment. And I like learning how people conflict and how they fight and how they overcome those challenges. Jasmine's specialty is more along the lines of college student dynamics. So just kind of the entire ecosystem of the campus setting and what creates a dynamic campus. And for Casey, his background was more along the lines of psychology and organizational studies. And he had already known Courtney from a previous employer. and he kind of brought us all together. And as Courtney was saying, we first started off because we wanted to come up with an app that would be somewhat of like an instant therapist kind of thing, where you would log in and just voice your complaints or your stressors, and you'd have someone on the other end of the line willing to give you some advice. But after doing a lot of market research and getting quotes from developers, we first and foremost came to the realization that we don't have the skills to develop an app and to take it to the point at which it can be marketed and sold. And we also didn't have the capital either to try to make something like this happen. So we shifted our focus and just went back to the drawing board and took a look at the inventory of where we can all collectively contribute to an organization. And we all had experience with research. We all had, to some degree, experience with grant writing and statistics and analysis. So we figured, let's put these skills to good use. And essentially, what we've positioned ourselves as right now is an organization that helps other nonprofits that are dedicated to social good. And we have had the opportunity to pick up a couple of clients along the way. So just to give you an example, there's an organization based in California that teaches kids with autism how to play musical instruments. So we thought that was pretty cool. And we connected with them and had an opportunity to consult with them at no cost to them, and also to help them pursue a grant opportunity that aligns with their work. So now, in addition to doing their typical fundraising that they would normally do, now they're also considering grants into their revenue portfolio. And another organization that we're working with actively right now, just to give you an example, is it's actually a consortium of scientists from around the world that are working to find a cure for AIDS. So right now, AIDS is deemed an incurable disease, and technology has taken us a pretty long way. And this organization, which has a lot of stem cell research scientists on board and biotech innovators, have determined that they feel they have a viable solution to try to inhibit, prevent, and to eliminate the HIV/AIDS infection. So what they want to do is first and foremost do research to try to make the case that this kind of work is important, followed by taking the work to clinical trials and to test their product. So just to kind of give you an example, we're very moldable as an organization. So if there are any other groups out there that are in need of like strategy support, or they want to venture off into grant land for funding their operations, or if they want to split the workload for like a major grant, or if they're in need of any type of evaluation support, we're always willing to lend a hand.
Well, I'm glad the app didn't work out for you guys. I think you guys are doing something that has a far greater reach with the amount of help you're giving with people with research. I don't know, have you guys seen that there's there's a company that came out that's very similar to what your app was going to be, that just launched, I think, this year, that they're doing therapy all through text messaging.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that?
I haven't seen that per se specifically, but I know that there are many city initiatives, like at the local level. Like I know New York City has one where it's called NYC Well, and you can call 24/7 or text message, and you can get help if you're in distress, or if you're stressed out, just need somebody to talk to. And I know that in the UK they also have something. If I remember correctly, it's called the Silver Line. And it's a similar concept, but it's meant for lonely older populations too. Nice. So I'm not surprised to see that this kind of initiative has taken shape in other forms. But for us, it wasn't something novel anymore, because others have already kind of ventured into that.
So I love research. I've done research myself, whether it be for academia or just for personal interest. And, like I said, I can go down the rabbit hole. And since this is a show for parents, especially for dads here, I'm looking through, you guys have a podcast called Organon, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Organon.
Organon, there we go. I was curious if there was in reference to Aristotle.
It actually is, and we wanted to keep it in line with the ology theme, because ology is kind of like a branch of knowledge, and a lot of the sciences end in ology. So since we're multidisciplinary, we figured that was our name. And since the initials of our organization is ORG, so Ology Research Group, or org, it seemed to fit well when we were looking for words that coincided with the purposes of our podcast.
It's nice when everything falls in line, right?
Yeah.
So in looking at some of your shows, there were some ones that I spotted out that I thought were good for parents to be able to check out. There was one on college and being able to get through it without heavy student loan debt, because that's a huge issue these days. There's one on mental health awareness. I think the big one is cohabiting couples. I mean, a lot of people aren't getting married the way they used to anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So in just kind of running through your mind the list of shows that you have, what do you guys think are some other shows that parents might want to check out with respect to either their own personal well-being as a parent or with respect to their children?
Well, I mean, I might.
I put you on the spot there.
Yeah. So you mean like other episodes we may have done, or like other shows in general?
No, other episodes you may have done.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of them might have pretty good applicability. I know that our very, very first episode, which is a lot grainier than our most recent episodes, is titled "Mo Money, Mo Honey, Does Money Buy Happiness?" And I think that, you can, as a parent, you might be able to pick up a lot of these, a lot of these episodes, a lot of the themes that we're trying to cover. And especially, even if we put a podcast out there that might be seemingly more relevant for teenagers, at some point in the life course, a parent will have to be a parent to a teenager anyway. And also, when you have kids, they're small, they eventually, become toddlers and young adults, and then adults, and then eventually you end up being an older parent who is of someone who is also a grandparent. So then there's also that, kind of metamorphosis of the life course anyway. So I think a lot of our topics can pretty much cover, a broad range of subjects that are applicable across the board. What do you all think?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you, Carl. I think when we do topics, we always try to focus on issues that are most relevant to us and that has, that affects everybody. So, for example, we did an episode on winning by failing and how actually failure is a really good motivator for success and growth in a lot of regard. So, even though we don't have parents in mind, I think like that kind of idea of failure applies to everybody, not just kids or parents, but single people, young people, grandparents. Yeah, I would highly encourage you guys, if you want to take a listen to a show, because what we wanted to do was create a conversation and dialogue, but also include science and research behind it, so that way it's more of a curated conversation that just kind of gives you. We want people to walk away with the knowledge that they learned something new, or I've always learned something new when I speak there, especially when we did a podcast with you, and just the way that you talked about fatherhood and just made me reflect a lot about my own fatherhood, and like my relationship with my father and how I could improve it. So like that's the kind of conversation that we have every time.
Well, go ahead, Jasmine. I'm sorry.
One of the episodes that we first started was episode 22, and it was a book bag on one shoulder, and it was basically talking about can single mother college students be successful in school? And so we interviewed one of my dear friends that I mentor, and she just recently, 2 years ago, completed her bachelor's degree. But she was that statistic that 25% of undergraduate students, which is about like 4.8 million students, are raising children, and they're trying to also complete a college degree. And so, what are these obstacles that these are students who are parents, and they're they're trying to accomplish their American dream, which is that degree, and become successful in society. And what do they have to go through? She shared about her support system, that her mother is really somebody that has been able to help her to take to do the childcare, so that she could be involved in school and that she could become successful in what she needed to, because paying for childcare it is an option, but it was something that she could, she could still be able to go to school, and her mother was there to support her, or any type of parent was there to support her, and for her to still to complete school. And what that meant too, because she was married, but then she was divorced, and now she's raising 2 children on her own and moved back home with her mother. So that story was very powerful to see, because we've had a lot of comments too and stuff about that episode, that it inspired a lot of women, especially a lot of single mothers or single parents overall, that are trying to grow professionally, and go make sure that they become members of society.
Now that brings to mind 2 different questions here. I think we're all on the same page in the idea that, information is powerful, and can definitely help you grow and learn. With that in mind, do you feel like, with the abundance of information that's out there, are people taking advantage of the info? Should they be paying closer attention to the information that we all have access to? Or do you think that people are doing pretty well in absorbing that amount of information?
I think that people are distracted now, in all honesty. I feel that because of social media, and just all these distractions, when you look around anywhere, nobody talks to each other anymore. Everybody's on their phone. People want to work from home and be by a computer. People want to, just like, now society is very isolated, which is a struggle now, because now we have a lot of the young generation that's coming out. They don't have those essential skills, those social skills to go out. They don't know what networking is. They can't do their elevator pitch to sell themselves. They really they want to go into their own thing and they don't want to be supervised by anybody, right? I know I'm making a generalization, but I'm just giving an example. And so I feel, because of that, there is an abundance of information, but the reality is that you have to advocate for yourself, and you have to find that information. For me, I'm the oldest out of 2 siblings, so it's just, so for me, I've always had to find my own answers. I've had to apply for college myself. I had to look for jobs myself, pay my own bills, and I was bussing tables when I was 14, and I've always advocated for myself. And I've always looked for this information. So it's, for me, I think maybe that just comes from my instinct of being the oldest and being able to find things on my own. There's other people that they can't. They want to go to somebody in a source, where now with a website, you can just find everything and Google everything. But that's ultimately, like, you have to advocate for yourself, because if you don't advocate for yourself, nobody's going to advocate for you.
Well, and that's a really good point, and that brings me to my second part of my question here, which is, you guys you're experts on research. That's what you do. You research things.
Mm-hmm.
All of the amount of information that's out there, and so much of it just being able to just be thrown on the internet by whoever's sitting back with the keyboard. How do you suggest people go about research and finding out accurate information, correct information that's actually going to be a helpful guide, instead of the next person selling the next thing, or the next troll writing whatever they want to, mess with people? How do they go about making sure the information they're getting and researching on the internet is accurate?
Well, you want to find, like, credible sources. You want to find, like, professional associations that they're associated with. So if you're looking at mental health, then, you want to look at organizations that have been around, professional associations that have academic journals, or that have, magazines that are informal, or newsletters that you can get that information for. And you also want to make sure that you ask a lot of questions, and you see if the resources are credible. You want to make sure that the people that you're getting advice from, where did they go to school, what accreditations do they have, what certifications they have, are they registered with any professional organization? Those are important ways to make sure that you're getting credible sources.
Okay.
Like what Jasmine was saying is, you're getting the point where you have to be your own researcher. So in a sense, you have to challenge and question every research you read. We can't just expect advice to somebody, or something we read and accept that as truth anymore. And it's important, and it's actually a good thing, because that makes us a stronger kind of researcher. For example, if you're looking at a product for your kid, right? You want to look at multiple sites and multiple studies on that product to make sure that's safe. And I think that's something that everyone should be doing, rather than just saying, well, I heard in the news and they say it was okay, so I guess I assume it's okay. There's way too many cases where we put too much faith in institutions or companies, and then it ends up backfiring on us, in terms of safety and violations and chemicals and all those other stuff. But as a researcher, I mean, this, we always ask the question and we always dig deep. And that's something that I think everyone should learn as a skill, like how to fix a tire or change the oil.
Right. Yeah.
And always asking why. Like, that's part of critical thinking. But why is this happening? How is this happening? And then formulating like what are you trying to explain and how are you trying to explain it? And also, like, why is this important work, or why isn't it important work, or what are lessons learned?
Now I'm curious, because it's, I've been in academia for over a decade now, and one of the biggest problems that I have with academia, and I think, all of us have been there, is the fact that the research that's done, the way it's written, is very technical with respect to the field. It's not always written for the person who's sitting back, who really needs to hear the research, who really needs to hear the outcome and results. The average person is not going to scientific journal and statistical significance, or way through methodology and experimental designs. So do you think that we could do a better job in academia and translating that over to the masses, without losing the credibility of our subject matter and the methodology?
Well, I think that the whole concept of having the very technical speak to the very technical is, in a way, a form of like academic gentrification, in a way.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of the people who are studied are left out of the dissemination part. So I kind of feel that when a scientist or a group are looking to do any kind of research or to test an intervention, that they also kind of have a moral obligation to disseminate back to the people who were the part of that study, who are usually lay audiences anyway. So just to give you an example, something that we're working on right now is we're looking at a public data set called the ELSI, which is the elementary and secondary data set of the National Center for Education Statistics from the Department of Education. And what we're doing is taking a look across states to see, out of all funding streams and all variables in the data set, which ones produce the highest proportion of high school graduates and which ones don't. So some of the preliminary findings, some of the preliminary things that we're finding is that the student to teacher ratio is huge when it comes to graduation rates across the state, and also that money actually does not matter. More money does not generally equate to higher graduation rates, and there's actually states that that will allot over $20,000 per student in the public school system, and they're the worst performing states in the country. And one of them is actually Washington, D.C., ironically. When we finalize all of our stats and we're able to put together something that's acceptable for like a statistical journal or for an academic journal that studies education in general, we also kind of have an obligation to disseminate to people. So what we intend to do is create a podcast, like how we've been doing, which we consider it to be for lay audiences for the most part. and also to publish in in like local newspapers or in venues that we know are going to get more readership from from people who are going to take this information, interpret it well, and make decisions from it.
No, I love it. When I teach grad school, after I have students learn the concepts and principles in the technical verbatim style, I then make them go back and rewrite it and translate it for their grandmother. You can tell your grandma, you can tell anybody, right? So
Yeah.
what you guys are doing is really important because it does need to be disseminated to people that it's made for, right? So I mean, we're just sharing it in the hallways of the university. I don't know how much good it does. Well, the last thing I wanted to touch on, because you guys had mentioned that most of your work has been in conflict resolution with respect to your academic history here, is with kind of going back to what Jasmine was talking about, with the distractions, with the amount of screen time or separation and somewhat of isolation, people can do things, especially kids nowadays, where you don't have to have conflict. I can break up with someone through text message. I don't have to do it face to face. I can send an email to my teacher as opposed to having to approach my teacher and say, I need help with this, or I didn't do this type of thing. What if, in your guys' opinion, has the advancement in technology of making our life easier diminished our ability for conflict resolution?
I think it might be a kind of a mix of two. It kind of forces you to have a new skill on how to resolve conflict when you're not necessarily there face to face. I think people have a natural ability to not want to talk to someone, but at the same time, you still need to get to your end goal. So, like email etiquette and just text message etiquette, you have to learn what the appropriate way is, or else you're going to make someone else mad, like when you didn't mean to. So, I think it really forces you to adapt to the times where now everyone has to do all of these new skills. So, for example, having to do the extra research because you can't just trust whatever people are saying nowadays. So that's what I think overall, in my opinion.
Nice. I wonder if your guys' field of study is kind of, I'm just curious, do you guys know if they're in this new wave because of this new information and technology like Courtney was mentioning? Is this like a new area of study for them, all new things unfolding?
Well, when it comes to the field of conflict analysis and resolution, it kind of plays tug of war with the field of law, because traditionally those who practice law have already have experience with arbitration, which is one of the conflict resolution strategies. And they also have they're also generally trained in mediation and facilitation, but for a lawyer it's best to do an arbitration because the more time they spend on the case, the less money they make. So the field of conflict analysis and resolution kind of emerged and formulated an alternative dispute resolution field, so to speak. So now you have a lot of people who are specializing in just doing a facilitation in the organizational setting, who are just doing mediation. Sometimes you'll often find that there are marriage and family therapists, for instance, who are not trained clinical psychologists, for example, but they'll help a couple, and help them through the experience of overcoming their issues and understanding each other a little better. So I think that we have kind of like already borrowed a lot from different fields and have created like this network of knowledge as it relates to conflict analysis and resolution. And I think one of the benefits of being one of the newer fields is the fact that we can take contemporary types of conflict and analyze them and come up with different ways of solving them without kind of being distorted with more older forms of like conflict analysis.
Nice.
What do you think, Casey?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to circle back on your question about conflict in tech. And here's the thing about conflict. It's basically conflict is it's both a good and a bad thing. It's actually is more neutral. Is conflicts actually could be amazing because the truth is conflict is really the intersection between the emerging realities. So let's say if I believe a certain way and you believe a certain way and our ideals conflict, that's when we have the opportunity to really renegotiate our new reality. With tech there is true that with technology things have become, like we're in more sense isolated than ever, where we don't need to communicate with people. Look, right now we're using um, uh, a virtual meeting just to have this meeting, so we don't have that impersonal contact. However, in some sense, I feel like tech has allowed men particularly to be able to express their emotions better. There's something about not having to, men traditionally have been, because they're not as expressive as women socially. Um, they're trained to think or look or act a certain way. With technologies, especially let's say online dating, men are allowed to, I feel, express their emotions that they wouldn't otherwise without the aid of technology. And in a sense, that's facilitating a more deeper human kind of interaction. Um,
No,
and
that's a very interesting perspective, and I do agree that I think a lot of people tend to squash negative things out, or at least things that have potentially negative connotations, like conflict. When, just like you guys were talking about in one of your former podcasts, failure is necessary, conflict is necessary. All of this is necessary for growth.
mhm.
We just have this happy-go-lucky world where nothing's wrong, but everything's wrong, right?
Yeah. Also, we were interviewing this amazing psychologist, and she does therapy over the phone, over the internet. And one of the things that she said that was really interesting was that she said, because she did both traditional and telephone technology therapy, and what she said was that when people come to her over the phone or internet, they were a lot more open, and they were more productive in the session. And part of the reason why she said that is because, they're in the home, they're in the comfort, they're familiar, but also the fact that technology allowed them to say straight to the point, to, get exactly what they need to do. And I think that's just one thing that's benefit about how we use communication, because imagine how long it takes just to like connect and build rapport with that person. With technology, that barrier is removed, and you can really just discuss what you want.
Awesome, man. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming on. This was great. I think it's some useful information. How can people get to your podcast or get to contact your research group if they're interested in doing some research, or maybe have a foundation they want some help with? How they go about finding you guys?
Sure, we can be reached through Twitter at Twitter handle Ology Research, or emailed at info@ologyresearchgroup.org. And we can also share our website, which is ologyresearchgroup.org. And if you do a quick Google search, Organon Podcast, it'll come up on the Google Play Store, iTunes, and Stitcher.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you guys so much for your time. This was great information, and I definitely think it'll be useful for someone.
All right, great. Thanks so much for having us on.
Awesome, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You
Thanks.
too.
All right,
Take care.